This Wednesday, Hawkeye, the latest Marvel Disney Plus show debuts. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know either your excitement level for Hawkeye, or if you've seen it, what did you think about Hawkeye? My take isn't the right take, it's just my take, and I would love to see yours. Going into this, critics were allowed to watch the first 2 episodes of the show, and both episodes will be dropping this Wednesday. And let's get started with the good. And right off the bat, this is a good old-fashioned, grounded, accessible superhero show. There's very clear good guys and very clear bad guys. The word a lot of people are using to describe this show is street level, and it fits what this show actually is, especially compared to the rest of Phase 4, where you have witches battling each other in a sitcom, you have celestials, you have time police, international spies, 1,000-year-old warlords with magic bracelets. Here, you just have 2 heroes with bow and arrows battling mob bosses in New York City. It's a crime story. The threat is that someone was murdered and you're trying to figure out what exactly happened. So street level actually does describe what this show is. And another comparison people are making is to the Netflix Marvel shows. And in regards to the location, the scope, the size of the story, that's a very good comparison. But tonally, this is in line with the rest of the MCU. It does have some emotion, does have some darker elements, but it also is lighthearted and fun like most of the MCU. Speaking of the tone, another thing the show does really well is balancing being this lighthearted adventure with addressing Clint's past. So when it comes to the Kate Bishop character, she is this energetic, eager but naive wannabe superhero, and so there's just a lot of fun that comes with that. But at the same time, when it comes to Clint, our returning hero, his journey is much more about dealing with the fact that publicly he's this Avenger that saved the world multiple times, but privately, he was the vigilante killer Ronin for 5 years.
When I wore this suit, I made a whole lot of enemies.
And he has deep regrets about what he did, while at the same time being constantly publicly praised for being the Avenger. And the show just does a really nice job of finding a way to balance those, where there's a very heavy side to what's going on with Clint, while it never being bogged down by that. It never feels like there's tonal whiplash when you're going from these Kate Bishop sequences that are very amusing to Clint struggling with his past. Just a nice job of balancing it and feeling consistent while having humor as well as weight. And from there, let's talk about our cast. In the lead is Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye, and of course, he's as solid as ever. He's been playing this role now for 10 years, so in a certain sense, you know what to expect from him, but it's the first time he gets to be front and center. And also, we're seeing him at a very interesting point in time in his life where he's not in the middle of this big, gigantic global threat. He's just trying to spend Christmas with his family, a family that he'd lost for 5 years. But he's also very much dealing with his past, where everywhere he goes, he's reminded of the heroic side of history, while personally having deep regrets about what he did as Ronin. And he does a great job of being able to be gracious with the people addressing him, while you can tell what's going on in his head. You can feel the pain and the frustration of how clueless some people are when they approach him, but it doesn't need to over-explain what's happening in these moments or what's going on inside of him. The performance informs the audience entirely of exactly what he's feeling and why he's responding the way he is. And while he's kind of keeping people at distance and not fully being the charming superhero that they want him to be, he does it in a way where he's not also off-putting, which is a very delicate balance to do there. And the other lead here is Hailee Steinfeld as Kate Bishop, and she really is designed to be the charming, charismatic lead of this show. Since Clint is very much in this introspective phase of life, she's the one that brings all the energy to the series, and she just does a great job at being the charismatic personality because she is so eager to put her skills into practice to do good, to help other people, but at the same time, she doesn't have the wisdom to know how to do that. And so the more she goes into the action, the more problems she causes for herself. And she does it without fear of consequences, and that's what makes her so endearing and so much fun. Of course, Hailee Steinfeld has been starring in movies since she was like 8 years old. So even though she's only in her early or mid-20s, she's a seasoned professional and absolutely is able to carry a show like this and just be so fun to see on screen. And she has great chemistry with Clint, and because they're at such different places in their careers, where she's just starting out and is inspired by him, and he's at this point where he just sees all the regrets of the bad choices he made and can't embrace all the positives, it just makes for a great and interesting dynamic between their two characters and has a nice chemistry to it. There's also a tension where you're waiting for big payoff that's almost certainly going to come later on in the season.
Your problem is branding.
No, my problem is you.
Then you have Vera Farmiga. She's here. She's good. There's a little bit of mystery surrounding her character, but based off the first 2 episodes, hers is the character that's kind of least developed and the least interesting up to this point in time. And then the other lead here is Tony Dalton, and this is an actor I discovered earlier this year while binging through Better Call Saul. And he's just fantastic on that show as this character who is so charming and charismatic while being despicable at the exact same time, where he might have this big grin on in his face and he's just chatting away the person in the room, but you know something terrible is probably about to happen, and he brings all of that into this role on Hawkeye, where he's grinning all the time, he's being friendly, but you also know he's up to no good, and you're just waiting for the big reveal as to what's kind of going on that's driving his actions, but he's so charming at the same time. And then just speaking of the generic goons in the show, it's this group called the Tracksuit Mafia, who are designed to just be a little bit more interesting than the usual mafia goons who are chasing down our heroes on a show. The simple fact that they're wearing tracksuits is amusing in and of itself. The show has fun with that, and then they have kind of their own little banter between themselves that just makes them a little bit more fun and interesting than characters like this normally are on shows like this.
That's all you've got! Come on, throw another one!
And just in general, because it's designed to be more grounded, more street level, it is more relatable. Clint is trying to spend time with his family. He's trying to keep a promise to have the best Christmas they've ever had as a family.
Should we be worried?
No, it's nothing. I'll be home for Christmas. I promise.
Kate Bishop, one of her big struggles is trying to connect with her mother, and they just don't see the world the same way, so they're constantly at conflict with one another. Contrast that with WandaVision, where Wanda has accidentally taken a city hostage and kept them in a sitcom because her robot boyfriend died because an alien invaded the Earth. Not the most relatable situation. Or the demigod Loki gets arrested by the time police and he's existing outside of the timeline watching multiple variants of himself. Not the most relatable of situations. And so this show's kind of designed to be a little bit more connected to reality. Of course, it's about superheroes with bow and arrows fighting crime inside of the MCU, but there's more connection to real life and things you can relate to. And finally, there's just a lot of nice little touches all throughout the entire show. The opening sequence, I don't want to give any specifics away, but it is a great little way to introduce our new character and tie her into the mythology that we know and is already established. There's a lot of nice little amusing bits and details. If you've watched the trailers, you know that there's this little sequence about Rogers the musical. It's a fun little bit that's also used to kind of show the struggle that's going on in Hawkeye while at the same time being really amusing and funny. Going back to what I said earlier about the show does a nice job of balancing the tone, that it can touch on something heavy in a very silly, amusing context. And if you've seen the recent posters for it, there is a cute dog that has a strong presence throughout the first 2 episodes of the show. Just in general, this is very much my type of show where there's clear good guys, clear bad guys, some fun action, some amusing moments all throughout. This sort of thing is very watchable for me, and I can't wait to check out the next 4 episodes. With that said, though, it didn't fully blow me away, so let's move on to the mixed aspects of Hawkeye. And the big thing here is that this is very much a passing of the torch project. In fact, it's a little bit more the Kate Bishop show than actually the Hawkeye show. So for some of you, that won't bother you at all. It is what it is, and it does a good job at it. Other people will actually like that because you're Hailee Steinfeld fans, so the fact that there's more of her, and it's a great role for her, you like that. But like for me and some other people, it's a bit of a disappointment because very much like with the Black Widow movie, Black Widow and Hawkeye have been side characters for 10 years. Finally, in 2021, they're given projects where they are the title character, and in both Black Widow and in Hawkeye, the title character is outshined by a side character, whether that's Yelena or it's Kate Bishop in the case of Hawkeye. And it's just a little disappointing because you want them to get their moment where they truly are the standout, the big attraction that is the most interesting, charismatic person in their story. And even when they get their title project, someone else kind of takes center stage. And I think part of the problem there is just inherently with the nature of the Black Widow and Hawkeye characters. They're not written to be the most charismatic characters. They can be likable, they can be charming, they can be funny, they can be heroic. They're all of those things, but they're also more subtle than most of the other Avengers. They're not as overt and flashy with their personality, so they're not the easiest to make the center of a story. And so in the case of Black Widow, they have Yelena come in, who is this very funny character. And here you have Kate Bishop, who is this charming, eager young person that's just fun to watch on that journey, and thus she kind of takes center stage in the story. And to be entirely clear, it's a compelling arc. It's the right arc for his character to have at this point in time in his journey, but because they want it to be this lighthearted adventure, that means you need a lighthearted character also to be a co-lead, in which case Kate Bishop kind of takes center stage from him. And some of you are going to love that, some of you won't be bothered by that, and some of us are a little bit disappointed that he doesn't fully get to be the star character of his own show. From there, let's move on to the bad. And the big thing here is that 2 episodes in, that's 1/3 of the way through the series, and there hasn't been an immediate threat or compelling villain introduced as of yet. Now, there's conflict, there's been a murder, there's characters being chased by a gang in tracksuits, so you do have threats, but there's nothing that truly makes you feel like, oh wow, they are in danger. So you enjoy the sequences, you enjoy the characters, a lot of things have been set up, but 1/3 of the way through the series, it doesn't feel like things have kicked into high gear yet. And that seems to be a bit of a recurring theme with these Marvel Disney Plus shows, where they kind of meander around for the first 2, 3, 4 episodes, and it is in episode 4 where something happens where you start to feel like, oh wow, now we're in danger, now there's a threat, and it becomes apparent halfway through the show, and thus far, that's kind of what this feels like. Like, you do have an idea who the villains are, who the threats are, but you don't really think that anything bad is going to happen to our two lead characters, and it's not in any way immediately clear what the big threat of the season is. So it just feels like they're taking their time a little bit to get where they're going, which if the season was going to be 13 or even 10 episodes, I really wouldn't think much anything of it. But when you're a third of the way through the season, you're kind of going, okay, that's cool. This is fun. This is amusing. I like the characters. But where are we going with all of this? Like, what's really gonna happen? What's this really all about? Not just a bit of intrigue, not just I bet he's up to no good, and I bet she's hiding something, but what is the actual threat? It feels like we should know that this far into the season. Also, the action in the first 2 episodes I didn't think was all that good. Perhaps this is because the screener app we used, you have to watch it on your laptop, and there's a watermark across the screen that was ridiculously large for this show. Some of the scenes are a little bit in the dark, so when you have my email address across the screen, dark background, it's just tough to make out exactly what was happening in it, but I was not impressed by the action in the first 2 episodes because I couldn't really see what was happening. Real quick before I give you my final take on this one, be sure to join me down below in the comment section. Also, I've done a bunch of other content on the Marvel Disney Plus shows. You can check that out right up here in this playlist. Overall, Hawkeye is another solid Marvel Disney Plus show. If you're looking for something that's a bit more of a traditional superhero show, a bit more accessible in what you expect from the MCU, that's what this is. It's a lighthearted adventure with a charming new character, as well as a returning hero with a broken past that brings the emotion to things. It's a solid entry. I didn't think it was like mind-blowing, but it is a solid MCU show that delivers entertainment value. Remember to check out the rest of my Marvel Disney Plus show content right over there, and keep talking movies and TV too much.